YouTube. This is going to be a little bit different from a lot of my other videos where it's kind of just seeing hands and working on stuff. Hey Roxy. Say hi to YouTube. Internet cat tax. Be comfy. So, this video is about workbench infrastructure, or workspace infrastructure, or shop infrastructure. The stuff kind of behind the scenes that goes into making a space enabled to do what we want to do with it. So there are kind of three structural things that are like absolute top tier of you'll never have enough of them, but before we get to those, the kind of, if that's number one, here's number 0. The only constant is change. So what do we mean by that? There is no end setup. There is no, okay, I've designed this perfect space, this perfect bench, perfect shop, and it will never need to be updated. I'll never need to add to it. It's my forever setup. That doesn't work out. It doesn't mean you can't build things that last. You can. It doesn't mean you can't build things that you'll keep around. You can. But current you cannot possibly anticipate what future, older, more knowledgeable, more experienced you can decide that you need then. You can't tell the future. So what does this mean from a practical perspective? In practical terms, it means be aware up front and as early as possible that whatever you set up, whatever table you have, whatever shelving, storage, anything, keep in mind that at some point you're probably going to need to change it, or you're going to want to change it, or you're going to want to add to it, or replace everything wholesale. The earlier you plan for that, and the more comprehensively at every level of what you do with the space you do stuff in, that you account for the need to change things in the future, the more of a service you will be doing to your future self. The easier a time you will have later on. All right, we'll be coming back to that over and over, but for now, let's go on from 0 to number 1. 3 things in a shop. Shop, workbench, hobby and craft table, literally anything where you do stuff, repair stuff, build stuff. 3 things that you just never have enough of, no matter how much you have. Flat, open space. In this case, a tabletop, shelving space, literally any little bit of flat, usable area. It's a truism in a shop that any flat surface will accumulate stuff, be it something you're working on, something you just unpacked, a project that's been set aside. Every scrap of flat, open, available surface will get used. You think, I've gotten to that point, I can just add a little more. That'll be all I need. No up front. There is never enough. There is never, I can plan to have this much and I'll never need more than that. You'll always end up using up what you have, and you could end up using more if you had more available. It doesn't mean never be happy, never be satisfied. Just be aware that every scrap of surface you can use will be useful for you at some point. Fit as much as you can. Number 2, light. There is no such thing as too much light, too many lights, too many options for light. Like here, when I first transitioned to this bench setup, I had 3 switches here instead of 5. And what I originally built into the bench was this underbench lighting, side accent lighting, and the upper lighting. And I had to fiddle around with those to reposition them to get the lighting angles just right. But I thought I'd accounted for what I needed. No, I really hadn't. Let's see. So I wanted more light sourced from behind me, basically so it would eliminate my working area, but in no way could be directed into my eyes. So I added these side-by-side lights on poles. And then up there, sorry, I know the audio gets crinkly every time I touch the phone or do anything with it. But up there I have an LED shop light that illuminates all this. Now, I still have, the room light, but it really just wasn't enough. And then for this video, this specific one, where I was using that setup right there, this is the first time that I'm filming from this angle and position. And if you get into filming and lighting, you need light from behind the camera preferably. So I had to add another light. It's obviously just set there in a very jank style, but I needed even more light for this video specifically. You good? Okay. So, flat surface, light, and power plugs. Forgive me, I have our larger cat, Floof, has very fine hairs, and they just float around everywhere and constantly get in your, on top of your nose, in your mouth, and I'm like, darn you, cat. Anyway, power plugs. You just never have enough. You would think, oh, I've accounted for every piece of equipment I need to plug in, and a few extra for when I'm putting something on the bench. But you go back to the only constant is change. You keep adding more. You keep needing more. Keep running out. So I have right there, on the lower end of the bench, a power strip with 12 outlets. Up there I have 6. So we're already at 18. You'd think that would be enough, but no, I already ran out of those. I intentionally keep one open just so I could plug stuff in conveniently. Behind here, we have let me see if the camera angle can see that. No, the screwdrivers are in the way. One moment. So there we have another power strip with a bunch of plugs. I haven't used all of them, but that one's limited to 0.5 amp per plug, so only certain things can be plugged into that. And then that wasn't enough. So then, under here, I have another, 10 outlets. All of those are being used. So just so many things that need to be plugged in. It's crazy. Oh, hello, Floof. There's the culprit with the lawn hairs. You've seen him before in other videos. He's very pretty. And he's a chair thief. So, we've gone over, the big three. Flat surface area, light, and power strips. Tools was that one I wanted to include in this video. No, we can skip that. So, storage. I added the tool chest for storage to start with, because I was planning ahead. I knew I would use storage. When I originally put this together, I had practically no materials that I actually needed storage for. That was just future planning. I've long since used up all the space available in there, and I needed to add more storage. So I have, can you see? Yeah. We have that shelf over there. That shelving unit there. More shelving there. That's mostly for shipping supplies for eBay, for like when I fix something or refurbish it and ship it out. And then more storage there. That's for stuff that's listed on eBay for the most part and pending sale. Okay. You're very helpful, Flip. Yeah, you're complaining. All right. So, we've gone over storage. So, as we keep going back to it, the only constant is change. You'll end up needing to go through cycles of consolidation, reorganization, and kind of shop refurbishment for like major changes. Minor cycles would be simple stuff, cleaning up. Like, I've used all of my open space, I need to clean stuff up. Okay, so a lot of it was used by literally stuff I've ordered that's materials. In this case, they're DuPont connector kits. A lot of that stuff right there is just breakout boards for connectors and DuPont connector stuff. So that's materials, and I need storage for that. But I've used up a lot of my storage. So a minor cycle will be me taking stuff out of storage, reorganizing, resorting, and possibly redoing where I have what to make better, more optimal use of how I'm using my storage space, while still keeping everything easily accessible. So that's kind of a minor cycle. A major cycle, or refurb, is like when I used to be using just one of these fold-out 2x4 tables, and then I built this, and I switched over to this as my working surface. That would be like a major refurb or a major cycle. It goes back to the only constant is change. You will have these cycles, and you will continue to have these cycles. So, a practical way to apply that rule zero or constant zero, the only constant is change, is planning for those cycles, planning for those refurbs. What can you do to make it easier on your future self? I'm kind of at a middle ground when it came to building this. I built this out of wood. Wood is, out of all the stuff you can get, fairly inexpensive. Fairly. Everything's expensive now, but the wood was definitely less expensive than aluminum extrusion. Materials cost for this was $300-ish, maybe $350. Just the lumber, probably around $200. If I had wanted to do aluminum extrusion, which I really did want, the just the structural components came out to something around $1,000. So, trade-offs of the time, limitations. There are still things I could have done differently. For a moderate increase in expense and more of an increase in pain in my ass, say. I could have designed this to fit together not with screws, but with, say, nuts and bolts to make it more easy to disassemble at a later time and put back together. To make it easier to change things, or at least to take it apart if I had to move it. So let's give some extreme examples. On one end of, I refuse to change ever, and I'm going to make this as punishing on myself as possible in the future. Let's say I designed this and made it out of 2-inch square steel tubing. I cut all the tubing to size, ground it down, welded this entire structure as a single monolithic piece of 800 pounds of steel. No adjustments. Everything is welded together. You're not taking it apart. You're not modifying it. You can stick stuff on with magnets, I guess. But you're not like downsizing it without taking an angled grinder and cutting it to pieces. That's the extreme end example of I've screwed myself over. I've made change as hard on myself as possible. What's the easiest? Probably the aluminum extrusion. Aluminum extrusion has a lot of standardized connectors that just slide anywhere along the channel. It's so easy to modify. And you could just unbolt some bolts to take off a shelf, adjust the height of the shelf. That's what I really wanted to do. That's probably the most friendly for modification later. So if you want to change things, if you want to add attachments, that would have been the furthest on the spectrum of what I know at the moment to have been easiest on future change. But again, money. The only constant is change applies to a lot of different stuff. Labeling is something that you will end up changing semi-regularly. Like whenever you reorganize, you may find yourself going, I have to redo my labeling again? Yeah, I guess I do. But in my experience, and the experience of people I like to listen to, it's worth it. You can do things to make that easier on yourself. If you get a label maker with those expensive, same financial model as ink printer cartridges, and they're hard to remove, they stay stuck on real hard, you're making more work for yourself. You're making every time you have to change labeling more expensive and more pain in your ass. So while that is often the right tool for the job and it looks professional, it might not be the right tool for this job. I'll show you what I use. Bad floofy. So I have right here 4 by 6 inch shipping labels. They work off my thermal printer and they're adhesive backed. And I can just print whatever I want on them. It's not like they'll only print labels. So I can just type up a document on Google Docs, set the font size to 100 or whatever, and print them off there. And there you go. Uh, those are boxes of 6,000 labels. The cost per label is negligible to the point of don't even think about it. And the thermal printer just runs off of electricity to heat. It doesn't need toner, it doesn't need anything except electricity. So the incremental cost is basically non existent. So that's what I did. Um, I'm at a stage with the materials I bought where I'm going to enter into a new organizational cycle for material storage. I'm going to redo this, and I'll end up needing to peel these off. But it's not stuck on with superglue. The adhesive on there is meant to hold on relatively well, but also to be able to be peeled off. And much easier if you apply a little bit of heat, like with a hot air station. But even without that, if you just have like a label spudger, these things are great. It just comes right off. It doesn't leave much. So that can be redone with not too much effort and practically no cost except my time, which your time is valuable. But labeling is worth the investment of time. It saves you so much time. Along the lines of, I'm going to touch on another concept. Um, the more the philosophy behind labeling stuff is to make it easy at a glance to know what is where. Something else I've seen done is like if you have drawers or tubs here, if they're transparent, like just plastic, and you can see into them, that's another layer of making things easier on yourself. You can only see what's, at the side, but it still helps. So if I had this kind of thing, but they were made of clear plexiglass, that would be another layer of ease. It doesn't apply as well for drawers that are this thin, but if it was, for instance, if this wasn't just a shelving unit, but if it had doors, I've seen shop infrastructure where those doors have cutouts and they're just plexiglass on top so you can see inside of it without having to open it. That kind of thing is gold. It's absolutely worth it if you can get any kind of solution like that. Anything that saves you effort and time to know where all your stuff is very helpful. Let's put this back. What else do we have? Ease of access and convenience. This is a similar offshoot to what we just spoke about of making it as easy and fast as possible to know where things are, to make it just at a glance for you to be able to tell where everything is. The easier you can make it on yourself to put what you need in your hand or to use a tool, a workstation, anything, pays off more than you would think. I'll give you a personal example. Soldering. When I started out, a project I had was a quiet fume extraction system. And I eventually got that. It's down there. I used like really heavy rubber mats meant for horse stalls as my sound dampening material. And that worked. A lot of research and trial and error went into it before I actually got it to do what I wanted to do. Anyway, before that, before I had the fume extractor, and then after I got the fume extractor, but it was still just too loud to tolerate. If I wanted to solder, I had to close up my door, put on breathing protection. I had to open up my window, and it had to be weather that was compatible with opening my window. Put a fan on to evacuate solder stuff, and I would need to leave it like that for 10-20 minutes to cycle air through afterwards because of residual fumes, and I didn't want that going into the house. it was a lot of extra stuff to have to do to just solder a couple of solder joints. Guess how often I actually soldered anything? Almost never. A couple times. A few times when I had something that I just needed to get done. It was high enough on importance that I was willing to tolerate all of that inconvenience, but very seldom. Now that I have my fume extractor and I have muffling on it so it's quiet, and I've made it easy on myself, I solder a lot more often because I've made it easier to do. The same thing with like this. When I'm at my bench and I need to use a razor, I have this right here. I also have a new product over here. This is a Tajima razor. The blades are better quality than that. I've had that for over 15 years. That specific utility knife there, I've had it for over 15 years. I don't think I've ever broken off the end of the blade. It's dull as crap. It opens packages poorly, but I still use it. This, brand new, high quality. Guess which one goes into my hand more often? Yeah. It makes a difference. It seems really silly on the surface. It seems like it shouldn't matter, like, oh, you're just being lazy. It's hard to put into words. The less steps, the fewer barriers, physical, mental, time investment to using a tool, the more you will use that tool. Likewise, if I had this in a drawer and I needed, a screwdriver, I would be more likely to try to make do at first with anything else that I have available than what would be the appropriately sized screwdriver for the job or the appropriate tool for the job. So just for that razor, the act of leaning and reaching beyond distance that is normally perfectly comfortable. Such a lazy, small thing. And yet I grabbed this. Planning around that is making things easier on yourself every time you reach for a tool. And if you need to reach for a tool, like any given tool, or just any tool at all, no matter which one it is, 1,000 times in a month, how much annoyance are you saving yourself? How much mental effort, cumulatively, are you saving yourself? How much more enjoyable are you making using your workspace for your future self? And the more enjoyable it is, the more you will utilize it. Oh, what else do we have? I think that's all of it. I think that is everything I wanted to cover. So I will just close with a little bit more of soothing internet cat attacks. Good, Floofy. Who's a pretty boy? You are. Yeah. All right. You have a good day.